How's everybody doing? My name is Anthony Brian Logan, and today I want to talk about something I hear a lot about on YouTube, on social media, all over the internet, in the media itself, on television, and that is this myth of the school to prison pipeline. If you're not familiar with that, the concept basically states that black and brown, mostly black students, go to school and school gets them prepared or indoctrinated for a life behind bars. Okay, you go to school and then towards the end, they just transfer you to jail, basically. But that whole thing does not make any sense. There's a reason why there's a skills gap there, because that's something else they say. They say, well, when black and brown kids go to school, they're not educated properly. They're given lesser skills. Sometimes they go to lesser schools, so they're not as prepared as their white counterparts or white kids that go to schools across town in a better school. But that whole thing, there's a reason why the skills gap exists, because I won't deny that there is a gap in the education and skills, but there's a reason for that other than this big back specter of white supremacy and racism. Let's start from the very beginning. Kids are only going to exhibit behaviors that they've learned at home while they're in school. A lot of black parents, what we do is we send our kids to school with nothing, with no preparation for school. White parents and other groups of people, even non-American blacks like Nigerians, Islanders or whatever, they send their kids to school prepared. And how do you prepare your child for school? Well, first of all, they need to have some type of decorum. They need to know how to behave themselves. That's the main thing that's plaguing a lot of these inner city schools. And it's also what's causing a lot of black kids to fall behind in their education. If you have little Tyrone who cannot control himself and he got about 2 or 3 of his friends in the same class, that's going to not only derail their education, but also aid in derailing the entire class. And if you got an entire school like that, it's going to underperform. That's what happens in a lot of these black schools. Like if you got a 100% black school, what happens is you got a handful of kids that are very disruptive that throw the whole process off. And teachers don't want to come there because they know that it's going to be a dangerous environment, probably, especially when you get to high school and stuff like that. It's going to be dangerous. Not only would you have kids that are actually in class acting the fool that disrupt things for all the other kids, making it an impossible environment to learn in, you're also going to have truant kids in the school. So when you hear about truancy, you don't think that the kid is actually at school. That's what happens. They're not outside of the school. A lot of times they're inside the school, selling drugs, trying to start fights. This creates a dangerous environment that's not conducive for learning. So these are the things that makes a black school perform worse than all the other schools. Behavior. And aside from the behavior, let's talk about preparation at home. Like I said, white kids, non-American black kids, and other groups of people, they tend to prepare their children for school. Behavior is the first thing. They give them the proper foundation at home as to how to behave in a public setting, and they carry that with them in school. Once they get out of school, in the professional world, it's how they're raised. But then you also have education before you get to school. A lot of black kids, they go to school with nothing. I mean, no pencil, no paper, no ability to spell their own name. They can't color. They can't count to 10. This happens in kindergarten, first grade. The teachers realize that the child is totally uneducated. Just because you have a public school does not mean that the public school is the only place where your child is able to get educated. See, myself, I had my mother, she would teach me certain things. I had my grandparents teach me certain things. They put me at least in front of the TV and let me watch Sesame Street, Reading Rainbow, stuff like that. Black parents tend to not do that. Not all the time, hashtag not all, because obviously my mother did it and my grandparents did it and people around me did it. But for the most part, we don't have that type of experience. So when it comes time for school, we're already behind. Little Johnny and little Javier know how to count to 10 or even 100. They know how to color. They can tie their own shoes. They can write their own name. They have the basis you need in order to have a head start in school. But little Jarquavius has nothing. So he's already behind, which is no surprise when you see the test scores in elementary school. I'll play some scores on the screen before you. This comes from my first elementary school in Portsmouth, Virginia. And you see the gap between the blacks and the whites. This is elementary school. So how can there be racism or anything like that that explains the test score differences? Okay. These are kids that go to the same school, have the same teachers. They're side by side. The white kids perform overwhelmingly better than the black kids. The reason not because of any racism. The reason is not because of any kind of prejudice. The reason is because the black kids tend to not have any education before they get to school, which is what causes the separation in test scores. And they, whoever you want to call they, the people that know, they know that if a child is not able to read on grade level by the third grade, they're pretty much done. At that point, they might as well just drop out because they know that the chances of them being able to turn that around are slim to none. When you are a child, when you're young, that's the best time for you to learn language. It's the best time for you to learn a lot of things that become more difficult for you to learn a second time or to relearn it, to get remedial training. It becomes more difficult for you to learn things later in life. And by the third grade, you need to have your basic structure set, and then you can build on that. If you don't have that set, it's going to be a hard time for you. Now, I got to move on a little bit into like high school, college. What happens a lot in high school and these urban inner city areas is that due to the lack of preparation from home and then the lack of ability to catch up all the way throughout, what happens is these schools tend to do things that are unethical. And what I mean by that is they understand that their students are not on par with other students in the state or city, maybe even in the same school. The black students, sometimes the Hispanics. And what they do is they push these kids through. Okay. Jarquavius is 15 years old. He's in the 8th grade still. He can't read. Well, push him on through. We can't have him in here. Okay. He's too old. He's not getting it, but we can't fail him because that's going to mess up our numbers. Okay. Now I will say that it's a lot of corruption going on in school when it relates to trying to get these numbers. You may see some dramatic statistic. I think I did a video about this, Baloo High School in Washington, D.C., where all the kids got into college, but they were doing interviews with these kids and they could barely talk. Okay. Half of the kids barely even attended school. If you're not going to school, then how are you getting educated? I think one person had 120, like they pretty much missed the entire school year, but yet they were still able to graduate. So when these kids so-called graduate high school, they're no better than the kids who drop out. Sometimes the kids who drop out perform better than the kids who graduate because at least if somebody drops out, they maybe start working or something like that, or they go somewhere and learn a skill, become an apprentice. But these kids that stay in school think that they're actually doing something good. They think they have achieved something. And then when it comes time for college, they're not ready. They got to take remedial courses and then they get into debt. And then it becomes a very sad story when they may even graduate college with a house mortgage on their back in debt as far as the student loan is concerned. And then they can't find a job because they can't even really read. So then they may go into doing some kind of mischievous activity. But the fault is not at the foot of the school because it doesn't even really matter if the school pushed them through when they were not ready or not. If they failed them, the same outcome probably would have come as a result. Okay. The problem is home life. When you're not prepared to behave, when you're not prepared to learn, when you don't want to learn, when you don't care about learning, when you have no sense of being able to conduct yourself properly in a formal environment, in a professional environment, you're not going to perform well in school. And jail may be where you end up. So it's less on the backs of the schools. You can't blame the school because all they are there to do is to teach the curriculum. They're not there to mold a child. They're not there to raise children. They're not there to be babysitters. They are there to teach. And that's it. If you need a person to raise your child and you're the parent, then you got to figure out what you're doing wrong as a parent, because it's your responsibility to raise that child. It's not the schools at all. And until we figure that out, we're going to keep having this same cycle of negativity in the schools happen. Again, don't blame the school, blame the parents. If the parents are not teaching these kids how to do basic things, tie their shoes, count to 10, how to color, how to write their own name. If that's what is going on, then how can you expect for the school to fix all that? And it's not unfair when other people are teaching their kids these things. These things don't cost any money. And, I hear the whole thing about, well, people got to work. Well, hey, sometimes you may have two parents in the household that work. And when the mom comes back from her job, she can sit with little Johnny or little Jarquavius for an hour doing flashcards, or at least having them watch Reading Rainbow. See, what black families, what we do, we tend to have our kids be entertainment, have them dance for guests, or just, stick them in front of an iPad where they could play some kind of mindless game where they could be actually learning on that tool. The poverty argument doesn't make any sense. A lot of us in these so-called poverty-stricken areas, we have access to the internet. We have access to a public library. We have cell phones, iPads, computers. All these things are tools that can help your child become educated. Okay, when I was a kid, we didn't have all that. I got a computer when I was like, I say 10 or 11. But before that, you had the public library. You had Reading Rainbow, Sesame Street. These were priceless resources that I needed in order to get education outside of the school. A love for learning must be developed at an early age. If these kids don't care about learning at an early age, it's going to be hard for them to care about it once they get to be older, because the behavior has already been ingrained in them to not really care about such things. But what do you think? Do you think that there is a school to prison pipeline? And if so, please explain to me why you can have a white kid and a black kid in the same exact class. Like, they could grow up together. The white kid won't go to jail, but the black kid will. Explain how that happens. Because again, I showed you my test scores, not my test scores, but the test scores from my first elementary school, and you can see the gap. Why does that gap exist when you have these kids in the same classrooms with the same teachers? I don't understand. Do you think that I'm right, that there is no school to prison pipeline? It's more about a home life to prison pipeline. I've seen it myself. I've seen kids who had a good home life turn out well, and kids who had a bad home life turn out bad. And I've also seen kids that have had a good home life but squandered their privilege, so to speak, because they're hanging around kids who had bad home lives and they want to be cool with them. What happens is those bad kids, or the kids that come from the bad environment, they bring people down to their level if they're not there already, if you want to hang out with them. So whatever your comments are, please let me know in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.